Hello my friends, hello. So today I would thought about doing, and it's going to take us a while because I kept picking stuff off the shelves, favourite directors. So let's crack on. So the first one is Spielberg. I mean, this film is perfect. It's a perfect film, perfect performances, screenplay, direction, and it was only his second film. He'd done one film before this, which was the Sugarland Express with Goldie Hawn. But for a first film, this is absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. I mean, I don't like all his films. Some of them are saccharine sweet. I tend to like his darker films like Munich and Empire of the Sun, which is an adaptation of J.J. Ballard's semi-autobiographical. Scorsese, always Scorsese. He's still one of the few directors, as well as Spielberg, today that I don't think, even when they do something that I don't quite like, they're not doing anything wrong. And he's a bloody master. John Huston, this is Treasure of the Sierra Madre. John Huston's career again, and I think there's going to be a theme here. Again, it was like Scorsese and Spielberg's. It has its ups and downs, but even Huston's worst film is better than most people working today. I'm looking at like just most of the modern directors. There's one that's I don't know if it's an offshoot, an odd choice, but Richard Lester. I think he made the great rock and roll film. I mean, the quintessential rock and roll film in Hard Day's Night. This is the Knocking Out to Get It, which is amazing. He made Flashman, well, Royal Flash, based on George McDonald Fraser's Flashman novels. The Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers, I would say, are the best adaptations of Dumas novels. Just a great director. I think he's a true author. Argento, Dario Argento. I mean, the man was brilliant up until about 1989. I would say Opera was his last truly great film. And I wouldn't say that that's a truly great film. Opera is great, but this is his masterpiece for me. Profondo Rosso, or Deep Red. It was called, what was it in America? The Hatchet Murders. Don't know why, because don't know why, but the cinematography, the camera movements, the Goblin soundtrack, the Goblin progressive Italian rock soundtrack is amazing in this film. And it's David Hemmings, you know what I mean? I love David Hemmings. Billy Wilder. I mean, this was his first American film, but he made films in pre-war Germany before that. I've got quite a collection of Billy Wilder films, and I think about 14 months ago I read a massive biography about him, and it's just, the guy's sense of comedy was brilliant, his sense of humour was brilliant. Obviously with other script writers like I.A.L. Diamond, but I tend to like his darker films, like hang on a minute, like Ace in the Hole with Kirk Douglas, which is like an absolute, I mean, what year was this? 1951. Right, so 1951, and it's an absolute how journalists exploit the news and exploit a drama for their own ends. It's just beyond. It's like seeing the future. And Lost Weekend, which is also a great novel, great novel. But yeah, about an alcoholic writer trying to get through a weekend. It's amazing, and Ray Milland's performance is superb. A man I met, but I didn't have the balls to get his autograph. He's Nicholas Roeg, so this is the man who fell to earth. Obviously Bowie, and I can't believe when I met him, and I was in like a Q&A audience with him, and somebody they just, I don't know, somebody just went, "Why did you pick Bowie to play an alien?" But yeah, I mean, like, I think Don't Look Now is is an absolute masterpiece of like a film about grief. It's a horror film as well, but it's a film about grief ultimately, with Jodie Christie and Donald Sutherland. It's a beautiful film set in Venice. Beautiful. Terry Gilliam, I'm a massive fan of. Fear Love in Las Vegas, considered unfilmable at one point. And I think me and my best mate were one of 4 people in the cinema the day this came out. You say when cinema used to show films like this, and you could go like, "Oh my god, that's out tomorrow," and go to the cinema and see it. Now you don't. But yeah, it's just an amazing director, and he's had so much trouble. I mean, I could point to, you know, the where's he at? The one who killed Don Quixote. Took him 30 years to make, and it's one of the best making of a film, or well, one of the best tragedies I've ever seen, of making a director trying to make something he wanted. And that was with, there's a whole documentary with Johnny Depp playing Adam Driver's character when he first tried to make this in the early 2000s or late 90s. And it's just heartbreaking to see it all fall through, because he had like liars for producers, the weather went wrong, whatever could go wrong went wrong, and it's just heartbreaking to see a man like Gilliam, like obviously Python and stuff. And I mean, Brazil is just still pertinent to this day, still pertinent, still massively world building, and one of the best sci-fi films I've ever met, and it's not even sci-fi. Micheal Powell, but Emmerich Pressburger, well, not but, also Emmerich Pressburger, because they're both kind of directed together. Pressburger was kind of more the writer, but this is one of my favourite films of all time, by the way, if you can't see, Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. I mean, people talk about The Red Shoes, which is absolutely gorgeous, brilliant film about creation, about being an artist. I've got the box set up there with Do You Know Where I'm Going, and it was called in America with David Niven, Stairway to Heaven, and over here it's called, can't remember. But yeah, I mean, Jack Cardiff cinematography in The Red Shoes, but Jack Cardiff only had a little part to play in this with 3-strip, obviously 2-strip Technicolor. But Colonel Blimp is just a heartbreaker of a film. It's a man's life. And Churchill was going to ban this because it was made in 1941, 42. And it's about an old colonel, an old war hero that is friends with a German war hero from the First World War, and you see their lives, and it's amazing, amazing. Anton Mulbrook gives the best, and I'll still say it's the best. You can say what you want about monologues in modern cinema or monologues for the last 50 years, but the monologue by Anton Walbrook in this is heartbreaking, and it's just him talking to the camera, saying about how his son's got embroiled in the Nazi party, and it's fantastic. It just hits you. Great film. But yeah, Micheal Powell, Pressburger, love it. Obviously Leone. I mean, Leone only made, can't count them off the top of my head, but like Dolls Trilogy, 3. And the film that's most underrated, I think, is Fistful of Dynamite with Rod Steiger and James Coburn. It's a fantastic film, but yeah, just hold this up again, just for a prop. I think it's really underrated. Originally, Leone hired Peter Bogdanovich to direct it, and Bogdanovich got over there, couldn't speak Italian, didn't get it. Bogdanovich wanted to make a Ford Western, which was his bag. And Leone was like, no. Because I mean, Leone reinvented the Western and started spaghetti Westerns. I mean, there was ones like in Germany and stuff before this, but Leone's direction, I mean, the tight close-ups, the use of soundtrack, that is just amazing. And I think Once Upon a Time in America, Scorsese's apparently still doing it, trying to get the director's cut out that was like absolutely slashed by I don't know if it was Warner's or Universal, absolutely slashed, and that's the only version I've seen, which was like 4 hours long, as it was when I was a kid. And then I read the novelization, and then I can remember when video stores were shutting down, I got my dad to drive me to a town to buy Once Upon a Time in America. But yeah, and like I said in my last video, Desert Island videos, Once Upon a Time in the West is just the best opera. I don't care what you say, it's an opera. William Friedkin, obviously The Exorcist, but Sorcerer is his masterpiece. This is still a masterpiece. I think this is a flawless film, like many of these are. I would say like Colonel Blimp's flawless, Good and Bad and Ugly is flawless. Exorcist flawless. As a piece of cinema, it's flawless. It's better than the book, and William Peter Blatty was working on the set with him as they were filming it. Big shout out to a film I've loved, and a novel that I think is better than The Exorcist is Legion. And Exorcist 3 is one of the best sequels ever made, in my opinion. There you go, say what you will. Lindsay Anderson, who was part of the new cinema movement in 60s Britain, and this is the first part of the Mick Travis trilogy. So you've got If, you've got Oh Lucky Man, which is, where's the Blu-ray for Oh Lucky Man? But anyway, and then Britannia Hospital, which I've got. But Lindsay Anderson discovered Malcolm McDowell basically, and Kubrick saw this and went, that's Alex. But yeah, I love British 60s cinema, like what they're called, kitchen sink dramas, and the new wave of British cinema, which is this. So yeah, this I can remember like reading about, because I was also in libraries at school, and like reading film reference books or books about film, and I can remember, and I waited until I was 12 years old, I would say, when I first heard about this, and I got the screenplay out of the library when I was like 13, 14, and this wasn't shown on British TV until 1998. But yeah, it's like a rebellion in a boys' public school. I love McDowell. St. McDowell, by the way, there somewhere. Yeah. Signed photo. John Boorman, another British director who made it in the US with this, and then followed up with Deliverance, and then Zardoz. And I love Zardoz. I think John Boorman's the most underrated British director at the moment. I've just forgot another British director that I love. But anyway, this broke ground in 1967. This was a British director who directed a film with the Dave Clark Five to emulate kind of the Beatles, and he was just like, well, I'm going to make, it's not going to be Hard Day's Night, which was a groundbreaking film, but he went to America and made this hard-boiled crime thriller based on the Parker novels with Lee Marvin, and I defy anyone not to feel killed, man or woman, not to feel killed when Lee Marvin's in the opening scene walking down that hall. Federico Fellini, which I mentioned in my Desert Island Discs also. Amarcord is like his version of Porky's, basically, in fascist Italy. This is an American disc. You can't get it there. Criterion haven't released it in the UK for some reason. They don't tend to release that much. But Amarcord isn't even a word in Italian. It kind of means my friend, but it's a made up word, and it's just about young boys growing up in fascist Italy, and it's fantastic. And Fellini is a proper cinema master. John Frankenheimer, The Train. And I just want to say again, I'm not picking specific films, this is all about directors. But John Frankenheimer, massively underrated. He ended his career on a pretty bad Ben Affleck film, Reindeer Games, it's called in some territories, in some places. But I mean, he made this, The Train, which is unbelievably amazing visually. And another one of my favourites he made, which is like kind of like a long Twilight Zone episode, but with Rock Hudson. Seconds. So if you've never seen Seconds, believe me, just go out and watch it, because it will blow your mind. It's, yeah, the twist at the end, it's just the whole concept of it. But he made all sorts of genres. So The Train's a World War II film about Burt Lancaster, great actor, the swimmer, which I love, trying to stop Nazis stealing paintings from Paris in World War II. And it's him and Paul Scofield, great British actor, who plays, Paul Scofield plays the Nazi officer, and they're both fantastic in the part, but he actually crashed a train through a station to make this, and that's not just like Michael Bay bullshit. He actually done it. The cinematography is fantastic in it. It's just a gripping film from beginning to end. And as I say, this is like probably one of the most underrated films of the 60s. Because it's kind of like a long Twilight Zone episode, but it's so much more than that. Terence Fisher, I've got to mention. Terence Fisher, probably the most prolific or constant Hammer horror director, who had a great eye. He had a great eye. I mean, you watch the bit where it goes down to the brain in this film, in Frankenstein, and the way the camera moves, it's just amazing. And he used great cinematographers, great makeup artists, and people, for years thought these were cheap films, and they're not. Well, they were made for cheap, but the artistry in the sets, in the cinematography, in the design is just beautiful. And Terence Fisher knew how to move a camera, knew how to get the performances out of Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. Superb. Sergio Corbucci, next to Leone, the best. Simply the best director of action in spaghetti westerns. Simply the best. I mean, that's his most famous film, Django. This is one of my favourites though. Not my favourite. The Mercenary is my favourite. But yeah, he was Morricone, but he talked about fascism a lot and about like growing up in fascism, but as an action director, where Leone was kind of like a slow build and then boom, you know, like Eastwood would shoot somebody. This is pure action. He's just a fantastic director, and like as I say, second only to Leone as a director of spaghetti westerns. Orson Welles, obviously one. Why? Groundbreaking. Don't want to say more. The Trial's great. The Strange is great. The Magnificent Ambersons is the Great Lost film because it was edited while he was away. Hollywood, the studio edited while he was away in Brazil or somewhere, I think. But The Magnificent Ambersons was the film he made after Citizen Kane, and God, everybody wants to say that. Well, not everybody, but you know, people that like Wells want to say that. Kubrick, enough said. He didn't make two films the same. Picked the best people to work with. Picked the best screenwriters to work with when he didn't work on his own. Just a master, an absolute master for me. And the way I met my best friend, Adrian, I'm looking at you, because I was sitting reading a book about Kubrick at art college, and he walked up with us, and we've been friends ever since. So 28 years coming up. But yeah, you can love them and hate them, and you can love them and hate them any film he made at the same time. You can love a film he made, and then go back and watch it and just go, oh yeah, I don't think that was as good as I thought it was. But then you can come back to it and watch it again and go, yeah, no, it's brilliant. I mean, Barry Lyndon for me, I know I picked A Clockwork Orange, and I could tell a long tale about A Clockwork Orange. But Barry Lyndon for me isn't my favourite Kubrick film, but it's the one I'm most fascinated with, because shot with candlelight, and just, you can tell he wanted to make a film about Napoleon. I showed you the book with his screenplay and stuff in, and all his research, and he wanted to make it with Jack Nicholson playing Napoleon, and never got made. But you can see hints of it in Barry Lyndon, and I mean, god damn. I mean, NASA made lenses for that film so he could capture candlelight, natural light. He didn't use any, you know, light bulbs or cinematography that was not natural on that film. And it's a 3-hour film, and at the end of it, it's an absolute tragedy. It breaks my heart. The few times I've seen it, it's broken my heart. I mean, yeah, Brian O'Neill isn't the greatest actor, but you get to that end scene, and you kind of invest in the character. Well, you do invest in the characters, and yeah, heartbreaking. John Carpenter. John Carpenter was one of the first directors, apart from, I don't know, Kubrick, Coppola, who I was hooked on as like, but I got hooked on Carpenter as a teenager, and specifically this film. I can remember watching it three times in a row when I was 15. And then I watched Escape from New York right after it, and The Thing right after it. And people talk about The Thing, which is a great film, but I still think his first film, this, which is basically a remake of Rio Bravo, Howard Hawks' Rio Bravo, is one of his masterpieces. It's an absolute masterpiece. I mean, the opening scene where Vanilla Twist, those that know, you know. A director that I've only come to in the last 3 years, and it was through this great Indicator box set. And I love westerns. I grew up with them. With my granddad watching them with us. My dad watching them with us. But Boetticher. I mean, these are low budget westerns with Ridley Scott. Maybe averaging 70 minutes a disc, 70 minutes a film. But the sheer directorial vision, the sheer psychological vision of each of these characters, and these were just chippy quickies, but my god, they're superb. They're some of the best westerns ever made, I think. Especially Decision at Sundown, The Tall Tea, based on the Elmore Leonard short story. What's the one with Comanche Station with Lee Van Cleef, way before spaghetti westerns. So these are 50s westerns. But my god, what a director. He knew what he was doing and knew what he wanted to say. Shane Meadows. This is my signed copy. I don't know if you can see, of Dead Man's Shoes. Now, Shane Meadows is like the Ken Loach of the 90s, early 2000s. And I am actually in, briefly, Blinking Your Misses, but I mentioned on the director's commentary of the film he made after this called This Is England, because I spent the day on set, because I won a competition, because I knew his films inside out. So he started making short films, like absolute low budget, just mates with a video camera. Paddy Considine is superb, and this is his first film. Directed again by Shane Meadows. It's A Room for Romeo Brass, and it's an absolutely heartbreaking, funny, scary story of being a child and growing up, and then somebody older comes into your circle. Also signed. But yeah, I'll just put it in there again. I mean, This Is England. Oh, this is going to fall apart. Ridley Scott. So as a kid, my uncle took me to see Legend at the cinema, because we both watched Barry Norman's film 85 or whatever it was at the time, because it was year by year, film 85, 6, 7, 8, 9. And it showed you a clip of Legend, and we both looked at each other, and I'm 10 years older than my uncle. So he was 85, I was 8, and he was 18, and he went, "We're going to see a kid." But I've seen this before, because obviously Blade Runner's like 82-ish. And then, yeah, I didn't understand it in 1982, I was 5 years old, but Blade Runner's like one of my favourite films of all time. I mean, it's outstanding to look at visually. based on Philip K. Dick, obviously, but it's the themes in it, and I don't care what you say, all the cuts are good. All the cuts are good. I don't know, he keeps thinking, but not as much as George bloody Lucas. Next, maybe last, I don't know, I keep spying directors out with Call Me Eyes. Nicholas Winding Refn, and this is Drive from 2011. But I've followed Nicholas Winding Refn since 1997 when he released Pusher, and it was about the same time as like Tarantino and stuff and blah blah blah. But Pusher was like a cross between John Cassavetes and Tarantino. It was so raw and realistic. It's about like a drug deal gone wrong in Denmark, and it was like one of my favourite actors, modern day actors, Mads Mikkelsen's debut, where he plays a skinhead fascist called Tony. And then you learn more about him in Pusher 2 and Pusher 3. So I think it's like Nicholas Winding Refn's Godfather trilogy, kind of, but more violent, more graphic. But one of my favourite films of his is obviously Drive. Obsessed with that film when it came out. Just perfect soundtrack, perfect acting, amazing. But his second film he made after Pusher, I mean, he spent all his money on Pusher and then lost it all because he made like, it claimed its nose, as I say. It made its money back in Denmark and some of Europe. But then he made a film called Blader, again starring Mads Mikkelsen and the guys out of Pusher, a couple of the guys out of Pusher, which was probably his most autobiographical film. And he's just released a series on Netflix called Copenhagen Cowboy, which is insane. It's beautiful. There's I can't even describe it, but it's beautiful. And it's worth your time, and Netflix aren't pushing it. Idiots. Yeah, I'm seeing a couple of more directors. I'm seeing a couple of more. I've talked about Boorman. So, yeah. So, I'll give you 2 for 1. Howard Hawks, Rio Bravo. I could sit and watch that film any Saturday afternoon, and nothing much happens in that film. I'm not a massive John Wayne fan. I'm more of a fan of the directors he worked with. But Rio Bravo, it's just like nothing happens. You know, there's an incident that happens at the start, and then nothing happens for like an hour and 45 minutes. And then, well, let's put it this way. Where's it at? I can't find it. Well, Assault on Prison 13 is basically a remake of it. They've got somebody in prison in their jail. The good guys and the bad guys are trying to get him or want to get him out. But Howard Hawks' Rio Bravo is just a great hangout film. Because I say you hang out with the characters for like an hour and 45 minutes, and the last half an hour is just like the action. And that's not, the last half hour isn't even the best bit, you know, it's just the hanging out with the guys. Also in this set, one of my favourite directors of all time, Sam Peckinpah, who began the new Western, the revisionist Western. When he said, you know, he was like one of the first directors to just go, well, the West was pretty shitty really. When people were trying to get to California and stuff and hunt out whatever. But Peckinpah played on legends like Pat Garden, Billy the Kid. But one of my favourite films of his is his second film, Ride the High Country, which is right behind that phone, so I won't drag it out. And it's Ridley Scott and I can't remember the actor, but it's like that elegiac look back at the Old West, and that's what he kind of played on for the rest of his career. But not to say they just made westerns. I mean, Straw Dogs is one of the most powerful revenge films ever made. And I saw that when I was far too young, before it was banned in England, before it was banned in this country. I saw it on VHS. I was meant to be asleep on the sofa, but yeah, being that cinematic film kid, obsessed with films as I was, even at a small age, I kind of had one eye open. But yeah, sad end to his career. And who did I forget? And it's not even a great film. It's based on a Ellen Dayton book, who I love. But yeah, Ken Russell. I mean, this is $1 Billion Brain, which was like, they just kind of like went, well, who's hip at the moment? But yeah, Ken Russell is just like his own man. He's just like forcing you to look at like the extremities of like artists and people, and that's actually signed. If you can see, I'll put my hand up there. God love him. That's when I met him. He was like a month away from death, and he signed most of the back of my collection, my Ken Russell collection. But as I said before, he lived in Cumbria, like literally 6 miles away from where I live now, and made films. So like, if you watch Tommy, if you watch Marla, if you watch most of his early 70s films, they were filmed in, part of them were filmed in Cumbria or around the Lake District. But yeah, I could go on and on. I won't, because I think they're pretty much the directors like that I absolutely love, that I keep going back to time and time again, that got me more and more obsessed with cinema, because I read about these directors and then I go down rabbit holes about directors they recommend. Like, I only watched my first Kurosawa film last weekend, and it's shameful, I know. I watched Seven Samurai last weekend for the first time, and I know it's shameful, but never mind. You can't watch everything, can you? Anyway, thank you everybody. You might have enjoyed this video, you might not, but thanks for subscribing, liking. If you want to comment away.